Before we begin, thank you very much to Oh My God, They Killed Waspinator, you Blendtron, for joining the Patreon campaign. We know that name. How do you forget a name like that? Thank you very much for coming back to the Patreon campaign. Really do appreciate it. Of course, you are pitching in at the highest level, so please leave me a DM on Patreon with whatever video request you have for me. It is a very long queue at this point. I'm trying my best to pick through and figure out which ones I can actually make. But I'm working through it, and I thank everyone. And of course, yeah, if you sign up at the $15 level, you get a video, whatever you want. So, we did a video a while back, and by a while back, I mean like back in January, where we were actually looking at the 84 Autobot casts and assigning them beast modes. And I always meant to do the other side of that and never got around to it. So you know what? It's time to get around to that. It's long overdue. So we are going to take the 84 Decepticons and we are going to look at what beast modes they could actually have that make the most sense to me. Now, of course, this is completely subjective. These are just my ideas. You know, yours are going to be completely different. I'm sure everyone in the comments is going to tell me what beast Megatron really should have been. You know what? That's completely fair. That is completely fair. I want to point out a few things here. Number one, I don't want to stick to the Maximal and Predacon rules for this. You know, the Maximal and Predacon rules are, the Maximals are mammals, flying creatures, and fish. And then the Predacons are bugs, dinosaurs, and, you know, lizards. You know, things like that. I don't want to do that. I want to pick from the entire animal kingdom, which is what I have done. I've also opted not to include any dinosaurs in this listing. I want to stick to things that are actually on Earth right now that we can actually hide ourselves as or base ourselves off of. Because some of these are going to be pretty monstrous in size, not going to lie. And I will give you a warning. I'll give you a warning right at the top here. At the end of the, if you are arachnophobic, at the end of the video, a spider will be involved. So I'm giving you that one content warning. And I'll give you a heads up before we get to it, even though it's going to be pretty obvious. So, let us begin, and we start with Megatron. And Megatron, of course, it's difficult to work with because, you know, what animal is a gun? I'm not going to make him a pistol shrimp or anything, you know? So, what do I have to work with? Well, in my mind, I'm trying to figure out a animal that tells me that, like, I look at it and go, that's a walking weapon. That is a very dangerous creature to run afoul of, and that is a very devastating creature if you give it a chance to shoot, or, you know, in this case, ram. So we have gone with a white rhinoceros. I think I held back on the previous list specifically because I had this in mind for Megatron before, because, yeah, this can be a very dangerous animal. It is an animal with a very prominent weapon equipped to it, which suits Megatron just fine as far as I am concerned. Also, bonus points because, of course, it is Megatron's natural color. That's another thing. The last one I got a little hung up on, oh, like, this character has to be an animal that is this color. So when I get to a lot of red animals, it kind of gets a little bit dicey. So I try not to avoid that this time. I'm not like strictly going by, oh, it's a gray animal, it's going to be Megatron. This one just fits. This one just happens to fit very, very well. That said, I really only had to deviate a couple times. Because guess what? The Decepticons actually work better for the color palettes I was looking for. So it's all actually kind of works out pretty well. So yeah, essentially what I'm doing here is that I'm taking what modern Megatron is, a tank, and I am making some kind of animal equivalent of it. And if I'm thinking a tank as an animal, I'm thinking of a rhino. I'm also doing that with Shockwave, in that I am trying to take his modern adaptations and use them accordingly, because you're not going to find an animal that reminds you of a laser gun. You know, that's extraordinarily unlikely to find. However, we can adapt some of his more common and more modern interpretations. Like, for instance, the Walker tank that he is in Earthspark, as well as others like Cyberverse. He's also a walking tank. And there's a few other depictions where he has that as an alt mode. So I think to that, and I think back to some of the other depictions of Shockwave, in particular Energon, Prime, see, like, who else? Dark of the Moon, where the prominent feature of Shockwave is not just a gun arm, it's this one large prominent attack arm. And that's where I come up with something like a Fiddler Crab. Now, I know there are crabs that are bigger and more dangerous than this that have that one pincher thing, but this one is just a good example of the type of alt mode I would pick. Again, a crab feels like a walking tank to me. Also, it comes in purple. This one at monstrous size would be kind of terrifying. And yeah, I do think it's a decent fit, at least as far as just form goes. Maybe, and really, because Shockwave is very like Cybertronian in design still in alt mode, I did want him to stand out a little bit different than the other Decepticons. I wanted to feel like he's out of his element a little bit. So I think being something more aquatic is actually a little bit more fitting here. So that's the justification for Shockwave. Soundwave is probably the most obvious choice there is because, well, we need to accommodate his gimmick here. Because that really is iconic of Soundwave and really his personality, especially if you look at modern comic book depictions of him. So we really have to go with a marsupial, and in that case, it has to be a kangaroo. Obviously, a blue kangaroo doesn't exist. I would choose like some dark furred one, more in the, dark grays or black realm of fur, and then work the blue in during transformation. But we need something that can let him house his minions, right? And in that case, like, yeah, a kangaroo is just the only option I have. Technically, it could be any marsupial, but this is by far the most well-known. It's also not a beast we've ever had represented as a transformer, outside of Star Upper, who is fiction only. I wouldn't mind giving this a try. Admittedly, it's a weird call. It is a weird call, but it's really the only one I could come up with. I'm not going to make him a seahorse, where the dad carries all the babies or anything like that. Yeah, it's got to be this. And that does leave a question, like, what do we do with the cassettes? What do we do with Ravage and Laserbeak, who turn into animals already? I'm not going to flip the script and say, well, Laserbeak needs to be a tiny little jet now. No, we're not going to do that. See, I kind of view the animal mode of Ravage, Laserbeak, Buzzsaw, Ratbat, etc. I kind of view that as their robot mode. The cassette is the alt mode. So I'm not really concerned about that aspect of it. I'd leave that alone, but instead of a cassette, you would turn them into a Joey that could fit in Soundwave's pouch. That would be a really weird way of making... Good luck making a toy work. Good luck making the toy work. But really, you're not going to have an animal that fits what Soundwave does better than this. I mean, feel free to correct me. I'm sure there's someone out there who knows animal that stores other little animal inside it somewhere. But this is what I'm going to go for now, because it's the obvious choice. It's just an obvious choice. Let's get into Seekers now, and that means, of course, we must start with Skywarp. Yeah, I know, but this is the logical place for me to start, because I didn't want to just make them big predatory birds or anything like, obviously, eagles or anything that might be considered like a more evil bird, like a vulture. No, I do want to kind of go with that a little bit, but I decided to go with something a little bit cooler, something I like a little bit more, and that brings me to a raven. Now, for Skywarp, okay, a basic black raven, that's pretty spot on. You're not gonna do better than that. But that does leave the question, what about the other Seekers? Well, here's the fun part. A raven's feathers are iridescent. Depending on the light, they can shine in different colors. In fact, they can even have a little bit of a purple hue to them, or like a purple trim, if the light hits it right, which makes it even better for Skywarp. Too many S names in the Decepticons. That said, when it comes to the other seekers like Thundercracker, well, there's where the iridescence plays to our advantage, because one of the easiest colors to spot on a raven in the right light is blue, which means we can use the same bird and the same toy ultimately for both of these seekers. And rather than make them different species or different varieties of a particular bird, we make them both just normal ravens depicted in both of these states. You know, whether it's, you know, the simple black or the blue shining off of it. That, you know, that gives us the variety we need to let both of them happen. And that leads me to Starscream. Now, this one's a cop-out. This one is admittedly a cop-out, because we could technically do this with any animal, technically, but it is something that is at least observed in ravens, so I'm going to count it, and that is albinoism. There are such things as white ravens. They are exceptionally rare. However, they do exist, and the fact that they are rare actually makes me more inclined to pick this alt mode for the Seekers, because that's Starscream wanting to stand out. It's not enough. It's not enough to be a cool bird, but you also have to be the special one. You know, Skywarp is just your basic black raven. You know, Thundercracker is a raven in the sunlight. No, Starscream's got to be the special one. He's got to have the ego showing. He's going to be the really rare white one. But it's a bird that can exist in all three of the colors we need. Now, once we get to the 85 cast, we might have to select some different birds, as long as they're in somewhat of the same, you know, variety. You know, as long as they're just birds, basically. I think it will be fine. But for the basic three Seekers, this works. Oh, and no, don't ask me for Rainmakers. I'm not picking it. I'm not trying to figure out what bird can be green, yellow, and purple. I'm not doing that. Someone else can research that part. Okay. We now need to move on to one of my favorites that never gets any kind of representation whatsoever in modern media, and that is Reflector. I love me some Reflector. I love it because it's, you know, the hive-minded aspect, and the one character in three bodies has such potential, and you never really live up to it. So, what do we do here? This is where I start thinking of function. You know, how do I replace a camera in a beast mode? You know, obviously, Polaroid does not make a panda, so I need to figure out something a little bit more clever. And I need to think about animals that have function that would work in relation to a camera, but also something that plays to their strengths. You know, Reflector is reconnaissance and spy missions, so I need something that works in conjunction with that as well. This is where I land on a chameleon. So for starters, chameleons can't exist in their natural gray coloring, so that already means, once again, we can work with the natural colors of the Transformer with the Beast Mode. However, the eyesight of the chameleon is what makes this work, because a chameleon's eyes are incredibly developed. They have 360-degree vision, which is perfect for a spy and, an info gatherer. They also have binocular vision and monocular vision, which means each eye can see independent from the other. Again, really good for a spy, you know. But what makes me drawn to this one for Reflector is the spy aspect. And you think, like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because a chameleon can blend in with whatever color it wants. So, of course, you know, you're going to have, a spy character based off of that. It's time for your biology lesson for the day, boys and girls. Chameleons cannot control their colors, and they are not like an infinitely colored spectrum. They do not quickly change color like you see on YouTube videos. Those are mostly fake. Chameleons change color based on mood. You know, if they are happy or just well fed, they tend to get brighter and easier to spot. So it's not much for camouflage, really. They tend to get more dull in colors and start blending into things a little bit better as a result, because in nature, yeah, you can blend into dull colors. You know, when they're scared, more submissive in nature. Basically, like if they want, if they want to hide, they tend to go into duller colors that are harder to spot. That's about the only camouflage they really get. What makes the colors on a chameleon work isn't the fact that they have the ability, that their body can change pigments. That's not something they can control, but they can do it. What's special about a chameleon is that their skin has a form of crystal as part of it. And what they can do is they can alter how the light reflects off of them in order to create different color appearances. Here's another science lesson for you, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone listen, there will be a test later. Everything bounces light. Everything reflects light. Everything you see. Light contains every color of the spectrum. And the reason we see color is because only certain colors from that light are reflected back off of those pigments that you see in your everyday life. So that's kind of how colors work. This thing, because of the crystals that are part of its nature, can control what is reflected back. It is literally an animal that is based on reflecting. Takes a lot of explanation to get there, but we got there. All right, let's move on here. So, obviously, the 84 cast of Decepticons is much smaller than the Autobots. So we had to cheat a little bit and go to the 85, but they appeared in season 1 of the cartoon. So we get to talk Constructicons, and this is where things get a little bit interesting. I need creatures that can build. I either need creatures known for construction or demolition. So when I start thinking of that, there's not a whole lot of animals. I don't want to do birds that, just for nest building. I certainly don't want to do beavers. That's not really like the vibe I'm getting here. So I started looking into the insect and arachnid kingdom. So I decided that if I'm going to do Constructicons, they're going to be insectoid. So for starters here, we have Scrapper, the leader. So his animal is a weaver ant. You will note that I am choosing animals and bugs that are specifically capable of being green. Now, there's a few we're going to have to cheat on, and ultimately, we're not trying to impress National Geographic, we're just trying to make a solid set of Constructicons that could potentially work as toys if you get crazy enough to attempt this idea. So, we don't really have to be strict, we can do the retracts thing of, it's not really meant to be in that color, but we can get away with it because who pays attention to bugs? I know you pay attention to bugs. I'm paying attention to bugs because I specifically selected a weaver ant who is naturally green. Likewise, well, I guess we'll get into more green ones here in a bit. Here's one where I have to cheat because for a Hook, I've chosen a termite. And I choose a termite because Hook's function when combining his Devastator is folding in half at the midsection, so the front and the back sides have to be around the same size in order to form an even chest that can hold the arms up. A termite has a very large head that's about the same size as its abdomen, which means it's capable of doing that, so it is capable of having that function to it. Also, again, we're talking about a creature that is not only capable of demolition, because who's ever had to tent their house before? But they're also capable of construction because termite mounds are a thing and they can be huge and extremely complex. So it works again as a Constructicon. Scavenger is where we start to play a little bit more. I want variety in here. I could have just made all 6 of them ants. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to have a little bit of interesting change going on here. So I have made him a cuckoo wasp, which again, we're getting into green, but we're also getting into wasps that are again, insects capable of construction. In this case, they're personal little hives. But that also means that his adjacent character, on the opposite arm of Devastator, who is Bone Crusher, that means he gets to be a green sweat ant. So different creatures, similar designs, they both make really good shaped arms. If you imagine the body of the bee and then the abdomen to be like the lower arms. Now you're getting into something. I also want you to consider, if we make the wings of these two purple, they can pop off and form the chest wing on Devastator. Do you see where my mind like went here? Literally, I hate to make the pun, but it was like literally buzzing when it came up with how well this works. Okay, long haul. Long haul is tricky because I didn't just want things that like make hives or or like create nests or something. I wanted something that is just specifically a digger because it's long haul. He's a dump truck. So again, we're gonna cheat. There is such a thing called a burrowing bug, which is just a little bug that is known to live underground. So in this case, you'd have to be large. And again, we might have to cheat the color because they're usually in shades of brown, but I think we can get away with it again. And this allows for a large, heavy set, because it's very beetle in shape. So this gives us that bulk we're going to need to turn him into a set of thighs and a pelvis for Devastator. And that just leaves one Constructicon left, and here's your arachnophobia warning. If you just don't like if you get triggered by the sight of a spider, you can go ahead, click off the video. I won't blame you. Thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time. However, if you want to see what Mixmaster could be, because he's the chemical expert, and he's got this big drum on his back, so all I could think of is the shape of a spider and the fact that you're replacing his cement chemicals with webbing. Perfect, right? Absolutely perfect. And you're not going to create a team of construction bugs without putting in a spider that builds its webs so beautifully. We have chosen this orb weaver spider, if I'm correctly pronouncing this, Arrhenius singulatus. Arrhenius singulatus. It's just a really cool looking spider. Again, I'm going for specifically green ones, but this one looks really, really cool on top of that. So yes, that's perfect. I think that's absolutely perfect for Mixmaster. I could not pick a better option. And just in case you just like close your eyes just to listen to the option, I'm going to say, open your eyes, arachnophobes. We're at the end of the video. I'm back on Megatron. You don't have to see it anymore. So there you go. There's the Decepticon cast, the way I would depict them with beast modes. Obviously, this is a very subjective thing. You're going to have completely different ideas and different standards for what it means and how this idea would work. But it's long overdue that we actually tackled the opposite side of the coin I flipped back in January. So there you go. Join me in another 6 months where we do the 85 Autobots. Oh no, but hopefully you had fun with this one. I kind of have fun with weird ideas like this. So, properly now. Thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.